The Battle of Berlin was the final major battle in Europe during World War II. It was a brutal and bloody affair that marked the end of Adolf Hitler's reign of terror. The battle took place in the German capital city of Berlin. It raged from April 16, 1945 until May 2, 1945. The battle was fought between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. The Soviets had been pushing westward for months. They were determined to take Berlin and crush the Nazi regime once and for all. The Germans, though exhausted and outnumbered, were determined to fight to the death. They knew that defeat in Berlin would mean the end of their thousand-year Reich. The Battle of Berlin was a significant turning point in the war. It marked the end of the Nazi regime and the liberation of Europe from Nazi rule. The battle also had a profound impact on the lives of millions of people. It left Berlin in ruins and resulted in the deaths of countless soldiers and civilians. The battle remains a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of peace. By the spring of 1945, Europe was a continent on the brink of collapse. Years of brutal conflict had ravaged the continent, leaving cities in ruins and economies in shambles. The once mighty German war machine, which had carved a path of destruction across Europe, was now a shadow of its former self. The Allied forces, bolstered by the might of the United States, had steadily pushed back the German lines, liberating Paris and Rome from Nazi control. In the east, the Soviet Union, bearing the brunt of the Nazi war machine, had steadily pushed westward, fueled by a thirst for revenge for the millions of Soviet citizens lost in the conflict. The Red Army, under the leadership of the ruthless yet strategic Joseph Stalin, had reached the outskirts of Berlin, the heart of the crumbling Nazi regime. The stage was set for a final confrontation, a battle that would decide the fate of Germany and shape the future of Europe. The Battle of Berlin would be a clash of ideologies, a struggle between the communist East and the capitalist West, a battle that would cast a long shadow over the decades to come. On April 16, 1945, the Red Army unleashed a thunderous artillery barrage on German positions outside Berlin, signaling the start of the Battle of Berlin. Operation Berlin, commanded by the renowned Marshal Georgy Zhukov, was a massive offensive involving over 2.5 million Soviet soldiers, 6,250 tanks, and 40,000 artillery pieces. The Soviets faced fierce resistance from the German Ninth Army, commanded by General Theodor Buss, but the sheer size and power of the Soviet offensive proved overwhelming. The Red Army advanced on Berlin from the east and south, utilizing their superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm the depleted German defenses. Soviet tanks rumbled across the countryside, crushing German resistance and driving deep into the outskirts of the German capital. In the air, Soviet aircraft battled for control of the skies, while on the ground, fierce street fighting erupted as German soldiers and hastily assembled Volkssturm units made up of elderly men and young boys fought desperately to defend their city. The roar of artillery fire, the rattle of machine guns, and the cries of the wounded filled the air as the Battle of Berlin raged on. Faced with the overwhelming might of the Soviet onslaught, German forces mounted a desperate defense of their capital. General Helmuth Weidling, the commander of the Berlin defense area, had at his disposal a ragtag force of Wehrmacht soldiers, SS units, and the Volkssturm, many of whom were poorly trained and ill-equipped. Despite the odds stacked against them, the German defenders fought with tenacity, determined to sell their lives dearly and defend the heart of the crumbling Third Reich. They transformed Berlin into a labyrinth of fortified zones, barricading streets, fortifying buildings, and utilizing the city's intricate network of tunnels and sewers to their advantage. The iconic Brandenburg Gate became a focal point of the fighting, with German artillery pieces firing on advancing Soviet troops from its shadow. The Reichstag building, a symbol of German power, was transformed into a heavily defended fortress, with German soldiers determined to hold it at all costs. Section 5. Caught in the crossfire. The plight of Berlin's civilians. As the battle raged, the civilian population of Berlin endured unimaginable suffering. Trapped between the advancing Soviet forces and the desperate German defenders, Berliners faced relentless artillery bombardments, street fighting, and the constant threat of death. Food, water, and medical supplies were scarce, and the city's infrastructure lay in ruins. Thousands of civilians sought refuge in bomb shelters and underground stations, seeking safety from the relentless bombardment and the horrors unfolding above ground. The streets of Berlin, once bustling with life, were now littered with rubble, shattered glass, and the bodies of the dead. Amidst the chaos and destruction, acts of incredible bravery and resilience emerged as ordinary Berliners risked their lives to help their neighbors, sharing what little food and water they had left. Section 6. The Führer's Last Stand, Hitler's Demise and the Fall of Berlin. By April 29th, with Soviet forces closing in on his underground bunker, Adolf Hitler, the architect of the Nazi regime, realized the war was lost. Trapped in his subterranean stronghold, surrounded by the ruins of his once mighty empire, Hitler married his mistress, Eva Braun, and dictated his last will and testament. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops just a few blocks away, Adolf Hitler committed suicide, shooting himself in the head. Eva Braun took her own life by swallowing a cyanide capsule. Following Hitler's orders, their bodies were doused in gasoline and set ablaze in the Chancellery Garden. With their leader dead, the remaining German defenders in Berlin were left leaderless and demoralized. General Helmut Weidling, recognizing the futility of further resistance, surrendered to the Soviets on May 2, 1945. Section 7. Victory in Europe. The surrender of Berlin and the end of an era. The surrender of Berlin marked the end of the Battle of Berlin and the effective end of World War II in Europe. After 6 long years of brutal conflict, the guns fell silent across the continent. On May 8, 1945, known as Victory in Europe Day or VE Day, celebrations erupted across the Allied nations as news of the German surrender spread. In London, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, cheering as King George VI and Prime Minister Winston Churchill addressed the jubilant nation. In the United States, Times Square was awash in confetti and celebration, as Americans rejoiced at the hard-won victory. For the people of Europe, VE Day represented the end of an era, the close of a dark chapter in human history. Yet, amidst the celebrations, the scars of war ran deep. Millions lay dead, cities lay in ruins, and the continent faced the daunting task of rebuilding from the ashes. Section 8. A continent divided. The aftermath of war and the dawn of the Cold War. In the aftermath of the war, Europe found itself divided. The Yalta and Potsdam conferences, held in 1945, saw the victorious Allied powers divide Germany and Berlin into 4 occupied zones, administered by the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The wartime alliance between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union quickly dissolved, replaced by suspicion and mistrust. The ideological divide between the capitalist West and the communist East deepened, leading to the emergence of the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension and rivalry that would shape the latter half of the 20th century. The construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, dividing East and West Berlin, became a potent symbol of the Cold War divide. For nearly 3 decades, Europe remained a continent divided, a battleground for ideological and political struggle. Section 9. Legacy of a Battle. Remembering Berlin, 1945. The Battle of Berlin stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the enduring legacy of conflict. The battle left an indelible mark on the city of Berlin, transforming its landscape and forever etching itself into the city's collective memory. Today, memorials and museums across Berlin commemorate the battle and honor the sacrifices made by those who fought and died in the fight to liberate the city from Nazi rule. The Brandenburg Gate, once a symbol of division, now stands as a symbol of unity and peace. The Reichstag building, rebuilt from the ruins of war, serves as a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the importance of safeguarding freedom. The Battle of Berlin serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation in preventing future conflicts. As we remember the Battle of Berlin, we must strive to honor the sacrifices of those who fought for freedom and work towards a more peaceful and just world for all.